Emily Russell's blue Honda Civic was last spotted leaving a graduation celebration in the rural outskirts of Sonoma County on June 8, 2004. The Northern California evening was unseasonably cool, with fog rolling through the vineyards under a sliver of moonlight. At 11:23 p.m., Emily's phone sent a brief text message to an old high school friend. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The following morning, her parents reported her missing when neither she nor her car returned home. Hundreds of flyers featuring the 18-year-old's smiling face were distributed across Santa Rosa, Sebastopol, and Healdsburg, but they generated no substantial leads. What truly happened after Emily left that graduation party has haunted Sonoma County for nearly 2 decades. On that foggy June night in 2004, the name Emily Russell became tied to a mystery that would stay with the Sonoma community for years to come. Emily, just 18, had recently graduated high school with honors, bright and compassionate, the only daughter of the Russell family who lived in a modest craftsman home on the eastern edge of Santa Rosa. She was adored by friends, respected by teachers for her determination, and her family took immense pride in her acceptance to UC Berkeley, where she planned to study environmental science that fall. That evening, Emily wore a carefully selected green blouse, a graduation gift from her mother, and drove her blue Honda Civic with license plate 4RTL289 to a friend's graduation celebration in the rural outskirts of Sonoma County, approximately a 25-minute drive from Santa Rosa. The party was hosted at an old converted barn beside a sprawling vineyard where strands of twinkling lights illuminated the weathered wooden structure against the darkening sky. Music mixed with laughter as graduates celebrated their accomplishments, and Emily moved easily through the crowd, chatting with classmates about summer plans and college preparations. Friends remembered her sipping from a water bottle throughout the evening, occasionally joining in conversations about future dreams, but generally maintaining her typical reserved demeanor at social gatherings. Around 11:15 p.m., Emily announced she was heading home. Several friends saw her wave goodbye, mentioning she wanted to get back before her midnight curfew to avoid worrying her parents. The blue Civic's engine turned over, headlights cutting through the rising fog before disappearing down the winding country road. That was the last time anyone saw Emily alive, and by morning, her parents grew increasingly anxious as calls to her phone went straight to voicemail. Missed calls accumulated as the hours passed, making their family home feel increasingly suffocating with worry. By noon, Marion Russell collapsed at the kitchen table while James Russell stood silently on the front porch, eyes fixed on the empty street, knowing instinctively that something was terribly wrong. The family immediately contacted the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department to report their daughter missing. Without waiting for official action, they mobilized their own search efforts. Marion hastily printed flyers on their home printer, Emily's bright smile and thoughtful eyes prominent on the white paper with bold text, "Missing, Emily Russell, 18 years old, blue Honda Civic, license 4RTL289. The Russell family, along with Emily's friends and neighbors, divided into groups to distribute flyers throughout Santa Rosa, Sebastopol, and Healdsburg. Within days, the 18-year-old's image appeared everywhere: coffee shop windows, community bulletin boards, telephone poles at busy intersections, even at the farmer's market where Marion shopped each Saturday. Strangers glanced at the flyers, some with momentary concern, before continuing with their day, leaving the Russells with only fragile hope that someone, somewhere, would recognize Emily or her Civic. The Sheriff's Department launched an official investigation, working with the California Highway Patrol to review traffic camera footage along possible routes between Santa Rosa and the rural party location. But in 2004, surveillance systems weren't comprehensive. Many country roads had no cameras at all. The only confirmed sighting was grainy footage of Emily stopping at a gas station in Forestville at 11:32 p.m., where security cameras captured her purchasing a bottle of water. After that, all traces vanished. No additional cameras captured her movements, and no witnesses reported seeing an accident or collision. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Law enforcement was at a standstill, and the Russell family grew increasingly desperate. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers refused to remain idle. They formed volunteer search parties combing areas along the Russian River, trudging through vineyards, shining flashlights into drainage culverts with the faint hope of spotting the car. Others took kayaks onto nearby Lake Sonoma, scanning the shorelines and shallow waters for any sign of the vehicle. Additional groups searched smaller bodies of water throughout the county, where locals mentioned cars had occasionally veered off roads during foggy nights. Mud-caked shoes and scratched hands yielded nothing but debris, tangled vines, and occasional trash. There was no sign of Emily or her blue Civic. Search days stretched into sleepless nights. Every phone call made Marion's heart race with anticipation, but it was usually just friends checking in or occasional false sightings. Each time, the family would rush out regardless of the hour, only to find it was a mistaken identification. Hope flickered precariously, briefly strengthening before diminishing once again. Local media quickly picked up the story. KRCB aired footage of Marion standing before cameras, her voice breaking as she pleaded, "If anyone has seen Emily or her car, please contact us immediately." The camera panned to show their Santa Rosa home, focusing on Emily's senior portrait displayed on a small table adorned with fresh flowers and a flickering candle, as if maintaining a vigil for her return. Newspapers throughout Sonoma County published photos of the Russell family and dozens of volunteers posting flyers with headlines like "Recent Graduate Vanishes After Party" and "Community Rallies in Search for Missing Teen." For weeks, public interest remained high. People discussed the case in wineries and coffee shops, parents cautioned their teenagers about driving alone at night, and students shared theories about possible abduction or accident scenarios. But like all media attention, the spotlight eventually dimmed. After months with no developments, Emily's story gradually disappeared from news coverage. Other events, wildfires, elections, local controversies, dominated headlines. Emily became just another statistic among thousands of missing persons cases briefly acknowledged by viewers before being forgotten. For the wider community, it was a passing fear soon replaced by daily concerns. But for the Russell family, it remained an open wound that never healed. They continued distributing flyers, calling Emily's name into the darkness, and praying together each night that answers would somehow find them. Time passed from the intense, heavy days of the initial search to months and years marked by a different kind of exhaustion, the weariness of prolonged uncertainty. By the second and third anniversaries of Emily's disappearance, the case was officially classified as cold in the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department archives. The Russell file sat in a standard-issue cardboard box marked with a typed label, "Missing, Unresolved." Dust gathered on the folder, mirroring the forgetting that gradually enveloped a case that had once mobilized an entire community. For many former classmates now in college or starting careers, Emily became a sad memory from their graduation year. But in the Russell home in Santa Rosa, her memory remained vividly present. Marion Russell, her once vibrant auburn hair now streaked with premature gray from grief, maintained a dedicated space in their living room with Emily's photographs. The centerpiece was her senior portrait, capturing her thoughtful green eyes and subtle smile, forever frozen at 18. Each morning before leaving for work, Marion touched the frame and whispered, "We're still looking, Emmy." On each anniversary of her disappearance, Marion wrote formal letters to the Sheriff's Department, pleading for the case to be re-examined, hoping a sympathetic detective might dedicate additional resources to finding her daughter. The responses were invariably polite but non-committal. "We understand your concerns and will review the case should new information arise." But new information never materialized. Some of the original detectives who had waded through mud and dived into lakes searching for Emily had retired. Others transferred to different jurisdictions or moved into administrative roles. Their memories of the Russell case faded, occasionally surfacing in department break room conversations. "That kid who disappeared after graduation, what was her name?" Still nothing? Newer deputies assigned to review cold cases occasionally pulled the Russell file, skimmed the yellowing pages, and returned it to storage, finding no overlooked leads to pursue. Meanwhile, the Sonoma community gradually moved on. The 2004 graduation party became a distant memory as wineries expanded, new businesses opened, and subsequent graduating classes created their own milestones. An occasional old-timer might mention Emily's case in passing conversation, but younger residents didn't recognize her name or story. Only a small circle of friends maintained active memories of the 18-year-old who vanished too soon. But for the Russells, time couldn't diminish their anguish or determination. Marion maintained a ritual. Every June 8th, she lit a fresh candle beside Emily's photograph and posted on Sonoma County community forums recounting her daughter's disappearance. "My daughter vanished in 2004. If anyone remembers anything or has information, please come forward." The posts typically received a handful of sympathetic comments or prayers before disappearing down social media timelines. For Marion, it was a small way to ensure Emily wasn't completely forgotten. James Russell, a soft-spoken man who expressed himself through actions rather than words, chose a different approach to his grief. He frequently visited Emily's favorite spot at Annandale State Park, sitting for hours on a particular bench overlooking the valley, speaking softly about family news as if his daughter were listening. He didn't cry as openly as Marion, but his eyes carried the unmistakable weariness of a father unable to fulfill his most fundamental promise, to protect his child. Over the years, their home became a gathering place for relatives and friends who refused to let Emily become merely a statistic. But as time stretched on, even these gatherings grew smaller, with fewer attendees each year. Resilience remained primarily with the Russells themselves. They existed in a community that had largely moved forward, within a legal system that had filed their case away, in a world that continued turning while their own lives remained frozen in June 2004. But in their hearts, the case was never truly cold. For Marion, even the faintest spark of hope, however improbable, was enough to continue lighting candles, writing letters, and calling her daughter's name into the night. The Russell family drew strength from stories of other missing persons found years or even decades later. They joined support groups connecting with families experiencing similar unresolved grief. These connections brought a different kind of comfort, understanding from those who truly comprehended the unique pain of having a loved one vanish without explanation. Though these relationships couldn't fill the void Emily left, they provided a community where the Russells didn't need to explain their ongoing search or justify their refusal to move on as some well-meaning friends suggested. James channeled his pain into action, volunteering with search and rescue organizations throughout Northern California, helping other families in their most desperate moments. Each time he participated in a successful search, locating a lost hiker or missing child, he felt momentarily closer to Emily. Marion began speaking at local schools about safety awareness, turning her personal tragedy into education that might prevent similar disappearances. Their grief transformed into purpose, their loss into legacy. Meanwhile, Sonoma County changed around them. The rural road where Emily was last seen was eventually widened and properly lit. The converted barn where the graduation party took place was renovated into a tasting room for a boutique winery. Emily's graduating class scattered across the country, starting families and careers, their high school years fading into nostalgic memories occasionally revisited at reunions. Some former classmates maintained connection with the Russells, while others found it too painful to engage with the unresolved loss that defined their graduation season. Law enforcement methods evolved as well. Digital forensics became more sophisticated, DNA databases expanded, and cold case investigation techniques advanced significantly. Occasionally, these developments gave the Russells renewed hope, particularly when they read about decades-old cases solved through new technology. But Emily's case, lacking physical evidence beyond the missing car, didn't benefit from these advancements. Without the vehicle or any recovered items, investigators had little to work with beyond witness statements and incomplete surveillance footage. Each passing year brought a bittersweet ritual of imagining milestones Emily would never experience: college graduation, career beginnings, perhaps marriage or children. The Russells kept a special box where they placed symbolic items representing these moments: a UC Berkeley pennant, a framed environmental science article Emily would have appreciated, birthday cards written but never delivered. These tangible representations of continued love provided comfort when memories alone weren't enough. Local journalists occasionally revisited the case on significant anniversaries, the 5th, then the 10th, publishing retrospective articles that briefly rekindled public interest. These moments gave the Russells opportunities to appeal again to the community's collective memory, hoping someone might remember a crucial detail previously overlooked. But these periodic spotlights quickly dimmed, the news cycle inevitably moving forward to fresher stories while the Russells remained anchored to that June night in 2004. 19 years later, when Emily Russell's disappearance had become a yellowing cold case file nearly forgotten in the archives, an unexpected development emerged from an unlikely source: social media. It was 2023, and a volunteer diving group called Pacific Northwest Recovery had gained significant attention online. They were ordinary people, mostly middle-aged professionals with regular jobs, who devoted their free time to an unusual passion: searching waterways for missing vehicles potentially connected to cold cases. They were about to bring the first real answers to a mystery that had consumed the Russell family for nearly 2 decades. The year was 2023, and the volunteer diving group Pacific Northwest Recovery had built a dedicated following on YouTube, where they documented their underwater searches for missing vehicles. Their channel had grown to over 500,000 subscribers who followed their missions across western states. "We're not professional investigators," the group's founder Michael Garrison often explained in their videos. "We're just people who believe families deserve answers, no matter how much time has passed." Their YouTube channel featured hundreds of videos showcasing their methodical searches for missing vehicles, emotional conversations with victims' families, and occasionally, the sobering moments when they discovered cars silent beneath murky waters. The team traveled in a worn but reliable RV equipped with specialized sonar equipment, underwater drones, and diving gear they'd gradually acquired through donations and their own investments. Among the many cases mentioned in their comment section, one name began appearing with increasing frequency: Emily Russell, Santa Rosa, California, missing since 2004. A previous video showed Pacific Northwest Recovery visiting Sonoma County in 2022 to scan local reservoirs, but their efforts yielded no results. They ended that video with a disappointed shrug and the words, "We've searched the most likely spots, but Emily's case remains unsolved." When that video was posted, however, the comments section exploded with local theories and suggestions. One message particularly caught their attention, sent directly to the group's private inbox: "You searched the wrong locations. Check the quarry pond off Willowside Road. It's only half a mile from where Emily was last seen, but it wasn't on any official maps in 2004. Locals know there's a sharp turn just before it where visibility is terrible in fog." The brief message intrigued Michael and his team. They reopened satellite imagery of Sonoma County, zooming into the rural area west of Santa Rosa. Sure enough, partially hidden by a grove of oak trees sat an oval-shaped quarry pond, unmarked on older maps but clearly visible in current imagery. It was located precisely where the message described, less than half a mile from Emily's last confirmed location, just beyond a dangerous curve in the road. Strangely, neither police reports nor previous search efforts had mentioned this particular body of water. "This could be it," Michael told his 3-person team during their weekly planning call. "If this tip is legitimate, Emily's car might have been sitting there for 19 years. The decision was unanimous: Pacific Northwest Recovery would return to California in April 2023. They arrived in Santa Rosa on a clear spring morning, their equipment-laden RV pulling into a local campground that would serve as their base. Before diving, they followed their established protocol, contacting Sheriff Catherine Mendoza, a 20-year veteran of the department who had recently been elected after promising to revisit unsolved cases. The phone call was recorded for their YouTube channel. "Sheriff Mendoza, this is Michael Garrison with Pacific Northwest Recovery. We've received a credible tip about the 2004 disappearance of Emily Russell. There's reason to believe her vehicle might be submerged in an unmarked quarry pond off Willowside Road. We're requesting permission to coordinate with your department on a search operation." On the other end, Sheriff Mendoza's voice was professional yet cautious. "This case has been cold for nearly 2 decades, Mr. Garrison. We've conducted numerous searches over the years with no results. But if you have new information and proper equipment, I'll authorize a joint operation. Everything must follow proper protocol, and any potential scene must remain undisturbed." The divers agreed to these terms, pledging full cooperation with law enforcement. When the YouTube video of this conversation was uploaded later that day, Marion Russell watched with trembling hands, whispering, "Please, let this be it." For 19 years, she had written countless letters to successive sheriffs and detectives, only to be politely dismissed. But now, with a volunteer dive team backed by thousands of online supporters, the case was receiving renewed attention. The search operation began early the next morning. Escorted by 2 Sonoma County sheriff's vehicles, the convoy traveled the winding roads toward Willowside. The quarry pond came into view, a roughly rectangular body of water perhaps 3 acres in size, its surface dark and uninviting. It had once been an active quarry providing gravel for local construction, but operations ceased in the late 1990s, leaving a deep depression that gradually filled with groundwater and runoff. Michael activated his camera, facing it as he stood at the pond's edge. "We're in Sonoma County, and today we're searching this unmarked quarry pond based on information from a community member." This location wasn't on official maps when Emily Russell disappeared in 2004, which might explain why it wasn't thoroughly searched during the original investigation. "We hope to bring answers to a family that's been waiting far too long." His words broadcast live to tens of thousands watching the stream, creating a virtual community united in the search for truth. The morning sun cast long shadows across the water's surface as a light breeze rippled the otherwise still pond. On Pacific Northwest Recovery's inflatable raft, the atmosphere was one of focused determination. Michael monitored the sonar screen, eyes trained on subtle patterns while team members Alex and Deanna worked the navigation system and underwater drone controls. Sheriff Mendoza and 3 deputies maintained positions along the shore, observing silently, occasionally conferring in low voices. Everyone present understood the gravity of the situation. If this search yielded results, it would change the trajectory of a case that had remained dormant for 19 years. The raft moved methodically across the pond in a grid pattern, each pass scanning approximately 20 meters of the bottom. Initially, the sonar showed only the uneven quarry floor with occasional debris, fallen branches, old tires, and scattered industrial waste from the site's previous operations. Michael maintained steady concentration, murmuring, "Take it slow and steady. If something's down there, we'll find it." After nearly 3 hours of methodical scanning, fatigue began setting in. The April sun grew warmer, causing sweat to dampen shirts and test everyone's endurance. On shore, the Russells had arrived, standing beneath a shade tree, Marion clutching her husband's arm for support, their faces a complex mixture of hope and dread. Just as the team considered breaking for lunch, the sonar displayed an anomalous shape on the screen. Deanna leaned forward, pointing. "Wait, look at that shadow." Michael adjusted the equipment, changing the angle of the scan, and the shadow began to take more definite form, a rectangular object with distinctly automotive proportions. Michael repositioned the boat for a cross-scan, and this time the image was unmistakable, a sedan resting at approximately 30 feet of depth, partially buried in silt. "That's definitely a car," Michael confirmed, his voice steady despite the adrenaline now coursing through him. The moment of discovery unleashed a torrent of emotion among the team. Alex punched the air with an excited yes, while Deanna wiped away sudden tears. On shore, Sheriff Mendoza stepped closer to the water's edge, speaking urgently into her radio. The Russells clung to each other, Marion's knees nearly buckling as James supported her weight, both unable to speak through overwhelming emotion. Sheriff Mendoza signaled to her deputy, "Call for additional units and the forensics team. If this is Emily Russell's vehicle, this becomes an active crime scene." The atmosphere shifted immediately from search operation to potential recovery, with all the procedural gravity that entailed. Michael turned back to the camera, maintaining his professional composure despite the charged atmosphere. "For those watching our live stream, we've identified what appears to be a submerged vehicle in the quarry pond. The sonar image shows what's consistent with a sedan. We're going to deploy a magnet to confirm it's metallic, and then our underwater drone for visual identification." Alex lowered a powerful neodymium magnet on a cable to the marked coordinates. The distinctive clunk of metal contact transmitted through the line, confirming they'd located a substantial metallic object. Next came the critical moment of visual confirmation. The team deployed their underwater drone, a small remotely operated vehicle equipped with powerful lights and a high-definition camera. As the drone descended through the murky water, everyone on shore and in the boat held their breath. The live stream viewership surged past 100,000 as word spread through social media that Pacific Northwest Recovery might have found Emily Russell's car. The drone's lights penetrated the gloom, revealing first the outline, then gradually the details of a sedan covered in silt and aquatic growth. The vehicle sat upright on the quarry floor, its blue paint faded but still distinguishable beneath patches of algae. "It's a blue sedan," Michael narrated for the livestream audience, his voice tight with emotion. "We're going to try to get a look at the license plate." He maneuvered the drone toward the rear of the vehicle, where years of sediment partially obscured the plate. With precise control, he positioned the drone to shine light directly on the license area, and as the silt cloud settled, numbers became visible, for RTL 289. The identification was definitive. After 19 years of searching, Emily Russell's blue Honda Civic had been found. Michael's voice caught as he confirmed, "The license plate matches Emily Russell's vehicle. We've found her car." On shore, Marion collapsed into James's arms, sobbing uncontrollably while he stood rigid, tears streaming silently down his weathered face. Sheriff Mendoza immediately took control of the situation, declaring, "This is now an official recovery operation and potential crime scene. All civilian personnel please step back while we secure the area." Her deputies began stretching yellow crime scene tape around the perimeter of the quarry pond as additional patrol units arrived with sirens wailing. Michael and his team complied, moving their boat back to shore but continuing to livestream with respectful commentary. "We've confirmed the vehicle belongs to Emily Russell, missing since 2004. We're now stepping back to allow law enforcement to handle the recovery professionally. Our role here is finished, but Emily's story isn't over." Within hours, specialized recovery teams arrived with heavy equipment and professional divers. The process of raising the vehicle would be meticulous, preserving any potential evidence that might have survived 19 years underwater. Marion and James Russell were escorted to a quiet area away from cameras and crowds, where victim advocates from the sheriff's department provided support and preliminary information. Sheriff Mendoza approached them personally, her manner compassionate but direct. "Mr. and Mrs. Russell, we've confirmed it's Emily's car. I can't tell you how sorry I am. We'll handle everything with the utmost care and respect, and I promise you'll be kept informed at every stage." Marion nodded through her tears, unable to speak, while James asked the question that had haunted them for nearly 2 decades, "Is she in there?" "We don't know yet," the sheriff answered honestly. "The recovery team will determine that once the vehicle is secured. Please prepare yourselves for any outcome." The Russells nodded, understanding that after 19 years of uncertainty, they would soon face a difficult truth. By early evening, the recovery operation was in full swing. Powerful floodlights illuminated the quarry pond as professional divers attached specialized lifting harnesses to the submerged vehicle. A hushed crowd of local residents gathered beyond the police tape, many holding candles in silent vigil. News helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting live to stations throughout California as a case that had faded from public memory suddenly became breaking news. The technical challenges of raising a vehicle submerged for 19 years were considerable. The car had settled into the silt, creating suction that had to be carefully broken. Divers worked methodically, communicating through underwater headsets with the crane operator positioned on the shore. As darkness fell, the operation continued under floodlights, creating an almost surreal scene at the once-forgotten quarry pond. Shortly after midnight, the surface of the pond began to ripple more intensely, and gradually, the roof of the blue Honda Civic emerged from the depths. Water cascaded from its surfaces as the crane slowly lifted it clear of the water. The vehicle was barely recognizable, its once vibrant blue paint now muted and patchy, windows clouded with mineral deposits, wheel wells filled with silt. But the license plate remained clear enough, for RTL 289, the numbers that had been printed on thousands of flyers across Sonoma County 19 years earlier. As the car was gently lowered onto a waiting flatbed truck, a respectful silence fell over everyone present. Law enforcement officers removed their hats, first responders stood at attention, and even hardened news reporters lowered their cameras momentarily in deference to what was fundamentally a solemn moment for a family's long-held grief. Forensic technicians immediately surrounded the vehicle, photographing every detail before anything could be disturbed. The car doors remained sealed, preserving whatever evidence might exist inside, until it could be examined in the controlled environment of the county's forensic laboratory. The flatbed truck departed with police escort, blue lights flashing but sirens silent out of respect. In the days that followed, the scientific process of investigation continued methodically. Forensic specialists used specialized tools to open the vehicle without compromising potential evidence. Water had long since filled the car's interior, but certain items remained identifiable: a high school tassel hanging from the rearview mirror, a UC Berkeley orientation packet in the back seat, and most significantly, human remains in the driver's seat. The medical examiner confirmed through dental records what the Russells had both feared and suspected: the remains were Emily's. She had been in her car at the bottom of the quarry pond for 19 years. Further examination revealed no signs of foul play. Instead, the evidence suggested a tragic accident. The foggy conditions that night, combined with an unmarked sharp curve in a quarry pond with no guardrail or warning signs, had created fatal circumstances for a young driver unfamiliar with that particular stretch of rural road. When Sheriff Mendoza delivered this conclusion to the Russells in the privacy of their home, the news brought a complex mixture of emotions. There was devastating finality in knowing their daughter was truly gone, yet there was also a certain peace in understanding that she hadn't suffered or been harmed by another person. The uncertainty that had tortured them for 19 years gave way to a grief that, while profound, could at least begin a proper healing process. "We can bring her home now," Marion whispered, holding Emily's high school photograph. "She's been alone too long." James nodded, placing his hand over his wife's. "And we can finally give her a proper goodbye." The community that had once searched tirelessly for Emily, then gradually forgotten her story, rallied once again, this time to support the Russells in their long-delayed mourning. Emily's memorial service at the Santa Rosa Community Church drew hundreds, including many former classmates now in their late 30s, some traveling from across the country to pay respects to a friend lost during what should have been the beginning of her adult life. The Pacific Northwest recovery team attended at the Russell family's invitation. Their YouTube video documenting the discovery had been viewed millions of times, bringing renewed attention to the challenges of investigating missing persons cases, particularly those involving vehicles potentially submerged in unmarked bodies of water. The comment that had led them to the quarry pond remained anonymous, though speculation suggested it might have come from someone who had worked at the quarry years earlier and recognized the dangerous curve when watching their previous search efforts. In the aftermath of Emily's discovery, Sonoma County implemented new safety measures on rural roads, particularly near bodies of water. Guardrails were installed along the quarry pond, and reflective warning signs marked the dangerous curve where Emily's car had likely veered off the road. These physical changes represented a community's commitment that no other family should endure what the Russells had experienced. For Marion and James Russell, finding Emily brought both closure and a new chapter in their lives. They established the Emily Russell Foundation, dedicated to improving rural road safety and supporting families of missing persons. Through this work, Emily's legacy continued, not merely as a tragedy, but as a catalyst for change that would potentially save other lives and spare other families similar anguish. On the one-year anniversary of finding Emily, the Russells returned to Annandale State Park, to the bench where James had spoken to his missing daughter for so many years. This time, they came not with questions and pain, but with wildflowers, Emily's favorite, and a sense of peace that had eluded them for nearly 2 decades. As they sat together watching the sunset over the valley, Marion gently said, "She's with us now, in a way she couldn't be before." James nodded, his hand finding hers. "And somehow, I think she always knew we never stopped looking." As twilight settled over Sonoma County, they remained on that bench, no longer waiting for answers, but simply remembering a daughter whose journey home had taken 19 years, and whose story had touched countless lives along the way. The Emily Russell case became more than just another solved cold case in California's history. It represented the enduring power of hope against impossible odds, the importance of community in supporting those experiencing unimaginable loss, and the impact of technological advances that can bring answers even after decades of silence. Most importantly, it reminded everyone that behind every missing person statistic is a human story, one that deserves to be remembered, pursued, and ultimately resolved, no matter how much time has passed. The discovery of Emily Russell's blue Honda Civic in the quarry pond marked the beginning rather than the end of a complex investigation. While the initial evidence suggested a tragic accident, Sheriff Mendoza's team approached the case with methodical thoroughness, knowing that 19 years underwater had both preserved and obscured crucial details that might tell Emily's complete story. In the county's forensic laboratory, technicians worked under controlled conditions to process the vehicle. The process was necessarily slow. Each item recovered required special handling to prevent deterioration after exposure to air. Photographs documented every stage as doors were carefully opened and the interior was systematically examined. The driver's seatbelt was found unfastened, suggesting Emily may have attempted to escape the sinking vehicle. The driver's side window was partially open, approximately 3 inches, perhaps an effort to equalize pressure or create an escape route. These details painted a heartbreaking picture of final moments, a young woman fighting for survival as her car filled with water in the darkness. Personal items recovered from the vehicle provided poignant glimpses into Emily's life and plans. Her wallet contained her driver's license, library card, and $37 in cash. A small notebook in the glove compartment held handwritten notes about UC Berkeley dorm essentials and a list of environmental science books she planned to read that summer. In the trunk, investigators found a carefully packed emergency kit, flashlight, blanket, bottled water, and basic tools, evidence of a responsible young woman who had prepared for roadside emergencies but could never have anticipated the circumstances that claimed her life. Most significantly, forensic technicians recovered Emily's cell phone from beneath the driver's seat. Though severely damaged by years underwater, specialists from the California Department of Justice's Digital Forensics Unit were able to extract partial data from its memory. The last outgoing text, sent at 11:23 p.m. on June 8, 2004, was addressed to her high school friend Melissa Adams. "Fog is crazy tonight. Taking the back road home. Should be there in 20." This message provided crucial context. Emily hadn't been familiar with the dangerous curve near the quarry pond but had chosen the route as what she believed would be a shorter way home. The heavy fog that witnesses recalled from that night would have severely limited visibility, making the unmarked curve and the adjacent water invisible until it was too late to react. When Sheriff Mendoza presented these findings to the Russells, she included another detail recovered from the phone, a draft text message composed but never sent, "Car skiddy." The incomplete text, likely started as Emily lost control on the curve, represented her final communication attempt, a heartbreaking fragment that spoke volumes about the suddenness of the accident. "We believe Emily was unfamiliar with this back road and encountered the sharp curve unexpectedly in heavy fog," Sheriff Mendoza explained gently. "The evidence indicates she tried to brake but skidded on the gravel shoulder. There were no guardrails or reflective markers at that time. Once the car entered the water, she appears to have attempted to escape but was unable to do so." Marion and James sat in stunned silence as these final pieces of their daughter's story fell into place. The knowledge that Emily had been conscious and fighting to survive in those last moments brought fresh waves of grief, yet also a certain pride in her resilience even when facing the impossible. "She was always so determined," Marion whispered, clutching a photograph of Emily. Even at the end. The medical examiner's report, delivered a week later, confirmed drowning as the cause of death with no evidence of traumatic injury prior to submersion. Emily had likely remained conscious for some time in the sinking vehicle, attempting to escape through the partially open window before ultimately succumbing to the rising water. The report, clinical in its language, concluded that death would have occurred within minutes of submersion. For the Russell family, these answers brought mixed emotions. The certainty of knowing replaced the torment of imagining countless scenarios, yet the reality of Emily's final struggle was its own form of anguish. In their living room, surrounded by friends who had supported them through 19 years of uncertainty, They held a private ceremony of remembrance, sharing stories of Emily's life rather than focusing solely on the circumstances of her death. "She wouldn't want us to dwell on those last minutes," James said, his voice steady despite his grief. "She'd want us to remember the 18 years of joy she brought us." Meanwhile, the discovery prompted the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors to launch an investigation into road safety measures, or their absence, at the time of Emily's accident. Records revealed that local residents had filed complaints about the dangerous curve near the quarry pond in 2003, requesting guardrails and warning signs, but budget constraints had placed the project on a deferred maintenance list. After Emily's disappearance in 2004, the quarry pond wasn't included in search operations because it didn't appear on county emergency response maps, having been recently formed when the abandoned quarry filled with groundwater. This institutional oversight became the focus of public outrage. At a heated county board meeting, longtime residents criticized the failure to address known hazards. "If those guardrails had been installed when first requested, Emily Russell would be alive today," one elderly man testified, his voice breaking with emotion. "Instead, she was forgotten twice, first when she disappeared, and again when we failed to find her." The board unanimously approved an emergency allocation for comprehensive safety reviews of all rural roads in the county, with priority given to unmapped water hazards. Within weeks, construction crews installed guardrails around the quarry pond and placed reflective warning signs at the approach to the curve. A small memorial plaque was mounted at the site, bearing Emily's name and the simple inscription, "Mayor's story protect others." The case generated renewed national attention when the Pacific Northwest Recovery Team's YouTube video documenting the discovery surpassed 10 million views. News outlets across the country reported on the story, highlighting both the tragedy of Emily's death and the extraordinary circumstances of finding her 19 years later. The narrative touched on universal themes of loss, persistence, and the bittersweet nature of delayed answers. As public interest grew, Marion Russell received hundreds of messages from families of missing persons, many seeking advice on keeping cases active or connecting with volunteer search groups. Recognizing an opportunity to create meaning from tragedy, she began organizing her thoughts and experiences, eventually partnering with a local publisher to create a guidebook for families navigating the aftermath of a disappearance. Titled "When Someone Vanishes, A Family's Handbook," the slim volume offered practical advice about working with law enforcement, organizing community searches, maintaining media interest, and preserving mental health during prolonged uncertainty. Marion's authentic voice, tempered by 19 years of experience, resonated with readers across the country. The book became an unexpected resource for both families and law enforcement agencies, bridging communication gaps that often hindered investigations. James channeled his energy differently, focusing on preventative measures that might spare others similar tragedy. He partnered with the county's Public Works Department to develop a citizen reporting app that allowed residents to flag dangerous road conditions, unmapped hazards, or missing safety features. The application, eventually named Emily's Watch, created a direct channel between community observations and county maintenance crews, bypassing bureaucratic delays that had contributed to the conditions surrounding his daughter's accident. The couple's efforts attracted attention from state lawmakers, who invited them to Sacramento to testify about gaps in missing persons investigations and rural infrastructure safety. Their testimony, powerful in its restraint and backed by their lived experience, contributed to the passage of the Russell-Mendoza Act, which established new protocols for coordinating searches across jurisdictions and mandated regular reviews of cold missing persons cases with modern forensic methods. Emily's case also created ripples throughout the volunteer search community. Michael Garrison and the Pacific Northwest Recovery Team experienced a surge in both donations and case referrals following their successful location of the Honda Civic. They used the increased resources to upgrade their equipment and expand operations across additional states, locating 3 more missing vehicles within 6 months of Emily's discovery. Emily's case showed us that no matter how much time has passed, answers are still possible, Michael explained in a follow-up video that garnered millions of views. These aren't just cars we're finding, they're chapters of families' lives that need closure. The anonymous tip that had led them to the quarry pond remained a mystery until nearly a year after the discovery, when an elderly man named Robert Callahan contacted the sheriff's department. Callahan had worked as site manager during the quarry's final operational years in the late 1990s and had witnessed its gradual flooding after abandonment. Upon seeing news coverage of the search efforts, he recognized the location wasn't included and sent the message that ultimately led to Emily's discovery. "I should have spoken up sooner," he admitted when the Russells requested to meet him. "I knew that pond was dangerous, we all did. But after operations shut down, I moved away and didn't think about it until I saw your search on the news. I'm sorry it took me so long." Instead of blame, the Russells offered gratitude. "You gave us answers when we'd nearly given up hope," Marion told him, clasping his weathered hands in hers. "That's a gift beyond measure." This spirit of reconciliation rather than recrimination became a hallmark of how the Russells processed their long-delayed grief. When investigations revealed the county officials responsible for the deferred safety improvements were mostly retired or deceased, the family declined to pursue legal action against the county. Instead, they focused on collaborative improvements to prevent future tragedies. "Blame doesn't bring Emily back," James explained to reporters questioning their decision. "But working together to fix broken systems might save someone else's child. That's what Emily would have wanted." In September 2023, nearly 4 months after the discovery, the Russell family finally held a proper funeral for their daughter. The service took place at Annandale State Park, where James had spent countless hours speaking to Emily during her absence. Under a canopy of oak trees with golden California light filtering through the leaves, hundreds gathered to celebrate a life cut short but not forgotten. Emily's high school friends, now approaching 40, shared memories of her environmental passion, quiet determination, and understated humor. Former teachers spoke of her academic promise and kindness to struggling classmates. The Russells themselves shared both cherished memories and honest reflections on their 2-decade journey through grief, uncertainty, and eventual resolution. 19 years ago, we lost our daughter twice, Marion said, her voice steady as she addressed the gathering. First to the accident that took her life, and then to the uncertainty that prevented us from properly mourning her. Today, we reclaim both, our memories of Emily's beautiful life and our right to grieve her loss completely. As the ceremony concluded, attendees each received a small native oak sapling to plant in Emily's memory, living tributes that would eventually create new forests throughout the county. The simple act of planting embodied Emily's environmental values while creating a legacy of growth and renewal from tragedy. In the months that followed, the Russells gradually adapted to their new reality, grief without uncertainty, remembrance without desperate searching. They converted Emily's bedroom, which had remained largely unchanged for 19 years, into a study where Marion wrote her book and managed the foundation established in their daughter's name. Emily's photographs remained prominently displayed, but the context had shifted from painful absence to cherished memory. As the first anniversary of the discovery approached, Pacific Northwest Recovery contacted the Russells about participating in a documentary examining the intersection of volunteer search efforts, modern technology, and cold case investigations. The project aimed to highlight how civilian groups with specialized skills could complement traditional law enforcement approaches to missing persons cases. The Russells agreed, seeing another opportunity to share lessons from their experience. During filming at their home, Marion revealed a perspective that surprised even James. "In the strangest way, finding Emily after so many years gave us a rare gift, the chance to see how deeply our daughter touched others' lives. The hundreds who searched for her, the thousands who shared her story, the millions who watched her being found, all of them carried a piece of Emily's memory forward. How many parents get to witness that kind of legacy?" The documentary, titled Finding Emily, premiered at the Sebastopol Documentary Film Festival in April 2024, exactly 1 year after the discovery at the quarry pond. It received critical acclaim for its sensitive treatment of the Russell family's journey and its nuanced exploration of how cold cases affect communities over decades. More importantly, it sparked discussions about infrastructure safety, missing persons protocols, and the role of civilian volunteers in modern investigations. By the documentary's national release in summer 2024, over 50 counties across California and neighboring states had implemented programs modeled after Emily's watch, with citizen-reported hazards receiving prioritized attention from public works departments. The Russell-Mendoza Act had been fully implemented at the state level, with federal legislation under consideration to establish similar protocols nationwide. On what would have been Emily's 38th birthday in October 2024, the Russells stood beside Sheriff Mendoza at the dedication of the Emily Russell Memorial Laboratory, a new digital forensics facility specializing in extracting data from damaged devices recovered in cold cases. The state-of-the-art lab, funded through a combination of county allocations and private donations, represented a tangible commitment to applying modern technology to long-dormant investigations. Every cold case represents a family frozen in time, waiting for answers, Sheriff Mendoza said during the dedication ceremony. This facility ensures that in Sonoma County, we never stop looking, never stop listening, and never stop learning from the past to protect the future. For Marion and James Russell, watching the ribbon-cutting ceremony marked another step in their transformed relationship with grief. What had once been a private anguish had evolved into a public purpose, a mission to create meaning from tragedy and to ensure other families would not endure similar prolonged uncertainty. We couldn't save Emily, James reflected as they walked among the oak saplings now growing at Annandale Park, many already reaching several feet tall. But through her story, we might save others. And somehow, I think she knows. Marion nodded, gazing at the young trees stretching toward the California sky. These will be full-grown oaks long after we're gone, she said softly. Just like the changes Emily's story has created will outlive us all. That's how she lives on, not just in our memories, but in every guardrail installed, every cold case reopened, every family that finds answers because of what we learned through losing her. As the golden afternoon light filtered through the growing saplings, casting dappled shadows across the memorial bench where they sat, the Russells had found a peace that once seemed impossible, not because their grief had diminished, but because it had transformed into purpose. Emily's story, once defined by absence, now created presence, in safety improvements that protected countless travelers, in protocols that guided investigations, and in the countless lives touched by a single question asked persistently over 19 years, "Have you seen our daughter?" In answering that question, however belatedly, a community had rediscovered its capacity for collective care. A tragedy had birthed transformation. And a young woman whose future was cut tragically short had nevertheless created a legacy that would endure for generations to come, measured not in the 19 years she lived or the 19 years she was missing, but in the countless lives made safer through the changes her story inspired. The impact of Emily Russell's case extended far beyond Sonoma County in the years following her discovery. What began as a local tragedy evolved into a nationwide movement transforming how communities approach both missing persons investigations and infrastructure safety. By 2025, the story had become a powerful catalyst for change, touching lives across America in ways no one could have anticipated. In January 2025, the 2-year anniversary of the case's resolution approached, bringing with it unexpected developments. The Russell-Mendoza Act, initially passed at the state level, gained federal traction when Senator Maria Chin introduced expanded legislation to the U.S. Senate. The National Cold Case Review Act would establish standardized protocols for applying modern forensic techniques to long-dormant missing persons cases nationwide, creating dedicated funding streams for both law enforcement agencies and qualified civilian search organizations. During Senate committee hearings, Marion Russell testified with quiet dignity about the 2 decades her family had spent searching for answers. "Our experience represents thousands of American families frozen in uncertainty," she explained, her voice steady despite the emotion evident in her eyes. "Modern technology offers new paths to resolution, but only if we commit the resources to revisit these cases systematically rather than waiting for chance discoveries." Her testimony, backed by statistics on missing persons cases and technological advances in forensic science, resonated across party lines. Senator Chin later credited Marion's perspective as pivotal in securing bipartisan support for the legislation. "Mrs. Russell speaks not from theory but from lived experience," the senator told reporters. That authenticity cuts through political divides. As the federal legislation moved through committee, the Finding Emily documentary continued generating tangible changes at local levels. After screenings in police academies and public works departments nationwide, officials began implementing key recommendations drawn from the Russell case study. In Minnesota, transportation officials conducted comprehensive mapping of unmapped water hazards near roadways. In Oregon, digital forensics units prioritized reviewing cold cases with potentially recoverable electronic evidence. In Florida, emergency management teams created standardized protocols for coordinating volunteer search groups with official efforts. Michael Garrison's Pacific Northwest Recovery Team, which had grown to include 8 specialized search units operating across 12 states, consulted on many of these initiatives. Their YouTube channel, now with over 2 million subscribers, had evolved from documenting searches to providing educational content on water safety, vehicle escape techniques, and collaboration between civilian experts and law enforcement. What we've learned is that solving these cases isn't about assigning blame, it's about building bridges, Michael explained during a TED Talk that went viral in spring 2025. Between past and present, between official agencies and volunteer groups, between families waiting for answers and communities that might provide them. His organization had located 14 additional missing vehicles since Emily's discovery, bringing resolution to families who had waited between 5 and 27 years for answers. Each case generated media attention that prompted new tips about other missing persons, creating a snowball effect that gradually reduced the backlog of unsolved disappearances involving vehicles. Meanwhile, James Russell's Emily's Watch application expanded beyond Sonoma County, with customized versions adopted by over 200 municipalities nationwide. The platform's success lay in its simplicity. Citizens could photograph hazardous road conditions, upload them with GPS coordinates, and track resolution through transparent public works response protocols. This direct channel between observation and action bypassed bureaucratic delays that had historically slowed infrastructure improvements. A particularly moving implementation occurred in rural Michigan, where 16-year-old driver Zoe Hernandez narrowly avoided an accident at an unmarked curve above a retention pond. Rather than simply continuing her journey, she parked safely and used Emily's Watch to report the hazard. Within 3 days, temporary reflective markers were installed. Within 3 weeks, permanent guardrails protected the curve. I'd watched the documentary about Emily in my driver's education class, Zoe later told a local reporter. It made me realize that speaking up about dangerous conditions isn't just about my safety, it's about everyone who will drive that road after me. This preventive mindset, taking personal responsibility for community safety, became a hallmark of what educators began calling the Emily Russell effect. High school drivers' education programs incorporated her story into curriculum, not merely as a cautionary tale about driving in fog, but as an inspiration for civic engagement and infrastructure safety. The Russell family's approach to grief also influenced psychological support systems for families of missing persons. Marion's book had grown from a self-published guide to a comprehensive resource adopted by victim services departments across the country. Mental health professionals recognized the unique challenges faced by those living with unresolved loss, a state of emotional suspension that traditional grief counseling often failed to address adequately. Dr. Prisha Patel, a leading trauma psychologist, collaborated with Marion to develop specialized therapy protocols for families navigating prolonged uncertainty. The Russell family's experience demonstrates that while hope sustains us through searching, it can also delay necessary grief processing, Dr. Patel explained in a widely shared journal article. We've developed frameworks that honor both the need to continue searching and the need to maintain psychological health during that search. These therapeutic approaches focused on building resilience without requiring families to move on prematurely, a balance the Russells had struggled to find during their 19-year journey. Support groups specifically for families of missing persons adopted these protocols, creating spaces where participants could share experiences without judgment or pressure to abandon hope. By summer 2025, the Russell family's influence had extended into unexpected territories. Several engineering schools incorporated the Emily Russell case study into their ethics curriculum, examining how budget constraints, incomplete mapping, and communication failures between departments had created the conditions for tragedy. Rather than simplistic blame assignment, these analyses focused on systems thinking, how seemingly minor decisions across multiple departments collectively created significant public safety gaps. The value of this case study lies in its complexity, explained Dr. Wei Zhang, engineering ethics professor at Stanford University. Students see how separate reasonable decisions, deferring guardrail installation, not updating maps after the quarry filled with water, prioritizing main roads over back roads for safety improvements, combine to create dangerous conditions that no single individual intended. This system's perspective resonated with students preparing to enter public service roles, encouraging them to consider the downstream effects of resource allocation decisions that might seem inconsequential in isolation. Several university programs established Emily Russell Public Safety Scholarships for engineering students committed to careers in infrastructure safety, particularly in rural communities where hazards often received less attention than urban counterparts. In September 2025, the National Transportation Safety Board released a comprehensive study directly inspired by Emily's case. The report, Unmapped Hazards, America's Hidden Infrastructure Challenges, identified over 15,000 water hazards nationwide located within 100 feet of roadways but absent from emergency response maps. More troublingly, over 40% of these unmapped hazards lacked appropriate safety features such as guardrails or reflective warning signs. The report prompted Transportation Secretary Julian Alvarez to establish the Rural Road Safety Initiative, a $250 million federal program providing matching grants to counties implementing comprehensive hazard mapping and mitigation. In announcing the program, Secretary Alvarez specifically credited the Russell family's advocacy. This initiative exists because one family transformed their personal tragedy into a mission to protect others. Their persistence reminds us that infrastructure safety isn't about statistics, it's about preventing other families from experiencing similar heartbreak. When the program was announced, James Russell was invited to the press conference in Washington, D.C. Standing at the podium, his weathered face reflecting both grief and purpose, he spoke briefly but powerfully. Emily was one young woman who made a single mistake on a foggy night. But her story has revealed systemic gaps that endanger all of us. These improvements aren't about my daughter anymore, they're about your children, your loved ones, and communities nationwide who deserve roads designed with forgiveness built in for human error. His simple framing, infrastructure forgiveness rather than driver blame, resonated with safety engineers, who began incorporating the concept more explicitly into design philosophies. The understanding that drivers will inevitably make mistakes shifted emphasis toward creating environments where those mistakes wouldn't prove fatal, an approach the Russells had advocated since learning the details of Emily's accident. As autumn 2025 arrived, bringing with it the colors that had always been Emily's favorite season, the Russell family received an unexpected invitation. Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government requested that Marion deliver the keynote address for their annual public service conference, focused at year-on citizen advocacy and systemic change. The invitation recognized how the Russells had transformed personal tragedy into broad institutional reform without holding elected office or possessing traditional policy credentials. Marion, who once couldn't imagine speaking publicly about her grief, now addressed an auditorium filled with current and future public servants. Her speech, later viewed online millions of times, offered profound insights into effective advocacy born from personal tragedy. Grief can either consume us or transform us, she told the audience. For 19 years, our family lived in suspended animation, unable to fully grieve, yet unwilling to abandon hope. When answers finally came, we faced a choice, to retreat into private mourning or to channel our experience into preventing similar tragedies for others. She continued, voice steady despite the emotion evident in her eyes. Effective advocacy isn't about shouting the loudest or assigning blame most forcefully. It's about transforming personal pain into constructive action that honors what you've lost by protecting what others still have. It's about recognizing that systems, not villains, usually create the conditions for tragedy, and that changing those systems requires partnership rather than accusation. Marion's perspective challenged conventional advocacy models that often position government agencies as adversaries rather than potential partners. Her collaborative approach had proven remarkably effective precisely because it acknowledged the complex constraints facing public institutions while still insisting on necessary changes. When we lost Emily, we initially wanted someone to blame, she acknowledged candidly. the sheriff's department for not finding her, the county for not installing guardrails, the mapping department for not updating hazard locations. But blame wouldn't bring Emily back, and it certainly wouldn't prevent other accidents. What would prevent them was working together to fix broken systems, and that required treating potential partners with respect rather than rage, no matter how justified that rage might feel. The audience's standing ovation lasted nearly 3 minutes, but it was the implementation of Marion's principles in diverse advocacy contexts that constituted her true impact. Community organizations addressing issues from environmental justice to healthcare access began adopting what became known as the Russell Method, combining personal narrative with systemic analysis and collaborative solution building rather than adversarial demands. By December 2025, as the National Cold Case Review Act moved toward final passage in Congress, Emily's story had transcended its origins as a local tragedy to become a case study in effective civic engagement, systems thinking, and transformative grief. What made the Russell family's impact so profound wasn't merely the legislative changes they'd inspired or the safety improvements implemented nationwide, it was their demonstration that ordinary citizens could transform devastating personal loss into meaningful systemic change. On Christmas Eve 2025, the Russell family gathered at Annandale State Park, now the site of a thriving grove of young oak trees planted in Emily's memory. The saplings, many now reaching 10 feet tall, created a living memorial that would continue growing for centuries. Standing among them, Marion and James were joined by Sheriff Mendoza, Michael Garrison, and others who had played crucial roles in finding Emily and transforming her story into a catalyst for change. As twilight settled over the park and small solar lights illuminated the memorial pathway, Marion reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. When we lost Emily, our world contracted to a single question: where's our daughter? For 19 years, that question consumed us. Now, our world has expanded again, but in an entirely different direction, not around Emily's absence, but around the presence her story has created in countless lives saved and systems improved. James nodded, his arm around his wife's shoulders as they gazed at the growing trees. I think about how many young drivers will come home safely because of guardrails installed after communities used Emily's watch. I think about families receiving answers because cold cases are being reviewed with new technology. None of this brings our daughter back, but it means her life continues to matter in ways we never imagined possible. Sheriff Mendoza, who had championed the case within law enforcement circles, added her perspective. What the Russell family has taught us isn't just about road safety or missing persons protocols, it's about how to transform tragedy into meaningful change. Their approach has become a model for how communities can address complex problems through partnership rather than division. As darkness fell completely, the gathered friends lit candles around Emily's memorial bench. The small flames illuminated faces marked by both sadness and purpose, the complex emotional legacy of a story that had evolved from personal tragedy to national movement. In the candlelight, Michael Garrison spoke the truth that had emerged from their collective journey: Emily's life ended too soon, but her story continues to save others. That's a kind of immortality few achieve, to continue protecting strangers long after you're gone. The Russells had discovered that while grief never truly ends, it can transform into purpose that sustains rather than consumes. Their daughter's story had evolved from a devastating loss into a powerful legacy that would continue affecting lives for generations. As they stood among the growing oak trees that would eventually become a mature forest, they embodied the possibility that even the deepest human suffering can, with time and purpose, nurture new growth and protection for others. In communities across America, Emily's story continued working silent miracles: guardrails that prevented accidents, protocols that found missing loved ones, collaborations that bridged institutional divides, and most importantly, a model for transforming personal tragedy into public purpose. The unmapped quarry pond that had claimed her life had been transformed into a catalyst for mapping thousands of similar hazards nationwide, ensuring that her single wrong turn ultimately created safer passages for countless others. As the small gathering concluded their memorial, Marion placed a smooth river stone on Emily's bench, a tradition she had maintained throughout their years of searching. But where previous stones had carried questions and pleas for answers, this one bore a single word: continuing. It perfectly captured what Emily's story had become: not an ending, but an ongoing force for transformation in a world made safer through the lessons drawn from her loss. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. Later that evening, in the quiet of her hotel room, Maureen placed the lantern on the windowsill. Its light cast a gentle glow across the room, creating a circle of warmth in the darkness. She thought of Catherine Mills, no longer defined by her disappearance and death, but remembered for how her story had ultimately brought light to so many lives. She thought of Pinecrest, no longer a town shadowed by secrets, but a community that had found the courage to face its past honestly and create a more just present. She thought of the many other communities now following similar paths, each finding their own way toward truth and reconciliation. And she thought of herself, not the reluctant sheriff who had once hesitated to disturb comfortable silences, but the woman who had discovered that true justice required not just solving cases, but transforming the conditions that allowed injustice to flourish. As she prepared for bed, Maureen left the lantern glowing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new communities seeking guidance, new opportunities to spread the understanding that had begun with one cold case in a small Oregon town. The work wasn't easy, truth rarely was, but its rewards were immeasurable. For every cold case solved, lives were changed. For every long-buried secret brought to light, healing became possible. For every community that found the courage to confront its past honestly, a more just future opened before them. And in that knowledge, Maureen found a peace she had never expected when she first opened that manila envelope containing a Polaroid photograph and 5 words that had changed everything: "I know who killed her." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.